Have you ever felt completely desired one moment and then discarded the next? Like you were the center of someone's universe at night, only to wake up feeling invisible by morning. That confusion, that emotional whiplash, it's not love, it's a trap. Behind that charm, that magnetic smile, lies something far more calculated than it appears. Today, we're taking a deeper look. We're going to uncover 5 intimate truths the narcissist doesn't want you to know. And once you see them clearly, you won't look at them the same way again. Sex, when it exists within a healthy bond, is a sacred act of trust, vulnerability, and closeness. But when you're with a narcissist, that sacred ground often becomes a battlefield. It stops being about love or emotional union. It turns into a tool, a strategy, even a weapon. Narcissists, more than most, grasp the emotional potency of sex. They understand its ability to create attachment, to release neurochemicals that foster intimacy, and to pull people closer. But instead of valuing this power, they exploit it. They use sex not as a gesture of closeness, but as a means of domination. A method to draw you in deeper while they retain control. Every kiss, every caress, every moment that feels electric, it's often crafted with intention. But that intention isn't affection, it's influence. In the beginning of a relationship with a narcissist, sex can feel intoxicating. It's intense, passionate, and almost otherworldly. You feel like the most wanted person alive. That's not by chance, it's by design. The narcissist is love-bombing you, using physical intimacy as a way to accelerate attachment, bypass your defenses, and fast-track trust. You begin to equate their touch with safety, their desire with love, their attention with your worth. But gradually, often without your awareness, that same physical connection becomes conditional. It morphs into a mechanism used to discipline or reward. It shifts from a shared expression to something transactional, something manipulated. The act itself becomes a performance, one that revolves around their ego. If you comply, flatter, and let them lead, they may respond with attention and warmth. But the moment you express a need, draw a boundary, or question them, the connection is withdrawn. This withdrawal isn't random, it's strategic. It's how they keep you unstable, always seeking, always trying to regain the intimacy that once felt so profound. It's a push-pull dynamic disguised as passion. Narcissists use sex as a lever for control. They understand how it distorts emotions. After a fight, for example, they may use sex not to reconnect genuinely, but to overwrite your pain, to blur your judgment, to reset the narrative in their favor. It's not reconciliation, it's reinforcement of control. You might think, maybe they do care, when in reality, they're just re-establishing their grip on your emotions. Silence becomes another weapon. Suddenly, they're cold, withdrawn. They deny physical affection, leaving you wondering what changed, what you did wrong. And then, just as suddenly, they return, this time with a fire even more intense than before. This unpredictable cycle keeps you emotionally dependent. You chase the version of them you met at the beginning, not realizing that version was an illusion. The high they gave you wasn't love. It was bait, carefully constructed, deliberately presented, and always temporary. Over time, you find yourself associating emotional instability with affection. You start to believe love means longing, passion means pain, and connection means confusion. That's the real danger in the narcissist's use of sex. It's not about the act itself, it's about the emotional chaos it generates. They don't want your love, they want control, and they'll use your own longing for connection to bind you to them. Meeting a narcissist can feel like being swept into a fantasy. The way they speak to you, look at you, touch you, it's electrifying, like nothing you've felt before. It seems too good to be true. And it is. Narcissists are masters of illusion, and love bombing is one of their favorite tricks. It's their way of locking you in before you can even recognize what's happening. They flood you with attention, compliments, adoration, and often intense physical intimacy. It feels exhilarating. You feel seen, valued, even cherished. But it's not real. It's rehearsed. Beneath that whirlwind affection is a cold strategy. The narcissist isn't connecting with you out of genuine emotion. They're studying you, learning what you want, what makes you feel special, what lowers your guard. They mirror your interests, echo your words, and speak of forever and fate. You feel like you've met your other half. But they aren't bonding with you. They're binding you to them. Love bombing is a fast track to dependency, designed to make you skip the natural phases of trust and dive headfirst into vulnerability. During this phase, sex is often intense, frequent, and layered with emotion. They may say things like, "I've never felt this way before," or "No one connects with me like you do." It feels genuine, even sacred. But it's all part of the plan. The emotional surge you feel, the euphoria, the security, isn't love. It's chemistry. Oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, they create a powerful emotional link. And that link is exactly what the narcissist wants. Because once you're bonded, you're easier to manage, to manipulate, to keep close. Once the narcissist feels they've secured you, the shift begins. It's slow at first, subtle. The texts become less frequent. The praise turns into critique. The warmth gives way to detachment. The passion starts to flicker. Where they once celebrated your uniqueness, they begin to highlight your faults. And when you question it, they deflect. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. They're just stressed. The truth is, the version of them you fell for never existed. It was a character. And now the mask is slipping. What hurts the most is realizing that the love you believed was mutual was in fact a script, a strategy, something they deployed to get you attached before revealing their real selves. By the time you start seeing the cracks, you're already deep in the emotional maze. You're not just hurt, you're confused. You're not just longing, you're doubting your own perception. You keep trying to return to the beginning, not knowing that the beginning was never real. The connection you felt wasn't a bond. It was bait. Narcissists aren't drawn to relationships for the same reasons emotionally balanced people are. While most seek love, companionship, or mutual growth, the narcissist is chasing something else entirely: admiration. They crave validation, attention, and ego reinforcement. And sex, to them, is another means to that end. Vulnerability, which is at the heart of real intimacy, feels threatening to them. They're terrified of being truly seen because deep down, behind the arrogance and charm, lies profound insecurity. So they use sex not to connect, but to perform. If they seem attentive or generous in bed, it's usually performative. They want applause, not intimacy. They want to be praised for their prowess, not build emotional closeness. The moment the attention shifts, or if you don't feed their ego, they retreat. The warmth vanishes, the interest fades, because for the narcissist, sex isn't about us, it's always about them. When the emotional layers of a relationship begin to deepen, the narcissist often becomes uncomfortable. Real closeness demands vulnerability, honesty, and reciprocity, things they're unwilling or even incapable of giving, so they sabotage, they distance, they pick fights, they withdraw, anything to avoid exposing the emptiness they desperately try to hide. Their mask starts to slip, and rather than let you see what's underneath, they pull back or lash out. That's when the devaluation truly begins. The pedestal they placed you on crumbles. the idealization turns to criticism. The once intense desire is replaced by indifference or coldness. And yet, just when you think it's over, they pull you back in. Maybe with sex, maybe with apologies, maybe with reminders of how things used to be. But those reminders are part of the illusion, designed to reignite your hope and keep you hooked. The emotional damage from this cycle is deep. You start questioning yourself. You wonder what changed, what you did wrong. You begin to think that if you could just be more of what they wanted, they'd return to that affectionate version you once knew. But that version was never meant to last. It was never real, and the person you're trying to win back is simply a mask, one they wear when they want something and discard when they don't. This cycle, idealize, devalue, discard, isn't random. It's the core of the narcissist's relational blueprint, and sex is often the thread that holds it all together, not because it brings closeness, but because it confuses, distracts, and binds. It keeps you emotionally disoriented, chasing validation and questioning reality. And in that state, the narcissist thrives, because as long as you're unsure of yourself, you're easier to control. So when you look back and ask, was it real? Understand this. Your feelings were real. Your connection was sincere, but theirs wasn't. They didn't offer you love. They offered you a performance, crafted, calculated, and deeply manipulative. And once they knew you were invested, they revealed their true selves. That's not your fault. It's their pattern, one they repeat again and again. Always. They'll retreat emotionally, detach without explanation, or even quietly sabotage the bond that once felt so intense. Moments of vulnerability that you once shared openly are now met with sarcasm or cold indifference. When you reach out to connect more deeply, when you express your emotions or share something personal, they may mock it, dismiss it as weakness, or make you feel like you're somehow too much. This isn't an accident, it's a defense response. The narcissist cannot tolerate true emotional exposure, so instead they diminish it, reject it, or twist the narrative so that you're the one left feeling embarrassed or ashamed for seeking closeness. In relationships with narcissists, partners often find themselves emotionally deprived. You might be in the same room, even share the same bed, yet feel completely alone. You try to start conversations about connection, about feelings, about emotional closeness, but you're met with blank stares, deflective responses, or even mocking tones. You start to wonder why someone who once seemed deeply interested in you now appears distant and detached. You may begin to question if you're asking for too much, if you're being unreasonable, or if perhaps your expectations are unrealistic. But the issue isn't your need for emotional depth. The real problem is that the narcissist never intended to meet that need in the first place. To them, relationships aren't about mutual understanding or emotional bonding. They view them as strategic transactions. They'll give just enough to keep you close, to sustain the illusion, and to ensure they continue receiving admiration. But the moment that admiration fades or attention begins to shift, they look elsewhere. Narcissists often seek new sources of validation, flirting with others, generating jealousy, or courting attention beyond the relationship. Not out of genuine interest, but because any scenario that brings them back to the center of attention feeds their sense of control. That's what they're truly after. Not love, not closeness, but control. You may deeply crave connection, shared vulnerability, and real emotional presence. But the narcissist isn't made for that. They don't want to be truly known. They want to be idealized. The more you try to get closer, the more they retreat, because real intimacy demands sincerity. And that's a threat to someone who spent their life wearing a carefully constructed mask. One of the narcissist's quietest yet most damaging tactics is withholding affection. It isn't always dramatic. It's often quiet, invisible to outsiders, and deeply confusing to the one experiencing it. This tactic might appear as silence, emotional absence, or the coldness of a distant gaze. It's the stark shift from warmth to emotional frost, with no explanation, leaving you spiraling in self-doubt. But this withdrawal isn't passive, it's calculated. When a narcissist pulls back emotionally, it's not usually because they've lost interest. It's because they want to shake your emotional foundation. They understand that you crave the connection, and by selectively denying it, they tip the balance of control in their favor. In the beginning, their affection may have been overwhelming. Every message, every touch, every gesture felt meaningful and purposeful. It made you feel chosen, cherished. But once they know you're emotionally invested, that attention starts to fade. Compliments become rare. Physical closeness feels scripted or disappears entirely. They stop initiating contact. Their eyes no longer meet yours the same way. They're distracted, distant. When you ask why, when you seek reassurance, you're met with vague excuses. They say they're just tired, stressed, busy. But the pattern tells the real story. Affection becomes a reward, only offered when you conform to their expectations. This emotional game breeds anxiety. One moment you feel loved, the next invisible. You start to link their affection to your behavior. You analyze every word you said, every action you took, wondering if you triggered the withdrawal. You might even apologize for things that weren't your fault, just to regain their warmth. This is exactly the psychological loop the narcissist wants you caught in. A cycle where you constantly self-adjust, where you try harder, bend more, lose parts of yourself just to be good enough again. It cements their power and keeps you emotionally tethered. Sex becomes another tool of manipulation. They might suddenly initiate intimacy, not as a mutual expression of closeness, but to lure you back in when they sense you pulling away or questioning the relationship. It becomes a reminder of their charm, a lure to keep you hooked. But when they want to punish or assert control, they withhold it. Suddenly they're unavailable, too tired, not in the mood, preoccupied. They know that physical intimacy can be a deeply emotional experience, and denying it can hurt just as much as harsh words. They use that power to confuse your emotional compass, to make you feel undesired, to slowly erode your self-esteem. Even more painful is that they rarely acknowledge the shift. They pretend everything is normal, gaslighting you into believing the growing distance is in your imagination. When you finally gather the courage to bring it up, they accuse you of being needy, clingy, or insecure. They turn your emotional needs into flaws. This deepens your internal conflict. You start to question your perceptions, to wonder if your longing for closeness is excessive. Eventually, you may stop bringing it up altogether. You learn to bury your needs, to keep quiet, to adapt, just to maintain the fragile peace. And that silence is what they're counting on. It gives them full control of when and how connection happens. Over time, you may find yourself in a relationship that looks intact on the outside, but feels utterly hollow on the inside. You walk on emotional eggshells. You measure your worth by how often they decide to show you warmth. The person who once made you feel irreplaceable now makes you feel unworthy. Still you stay, hoping, longing, clinging to the early moments of affection, believing that if you can just be enough, that warmth will return. But the withdrawal of affection is never about you. It's about power. The more uncertain you feel, the easier it is for them to manipulate you. And that uncertainty keeps you chasing something they never intended to truly offer. Jealousy is another emotion the narcissist wields with disturbing precision. In healthy dynamics, jealousy might arise occasionally, it's human, but with a narcissist, jealousy is not only encouraged, it's deliberately manufactured. They create scenarios to make you question your place, to make you feel insecure or easily replaced. These actions aren't slips, they're moves in a psychological game. Their goal isn't connection, it's dominance. At first, they may shower you with compliments, making you feel like the only person that matters. But soon, cracks start to form. They bring up past partners with an unusual frequency. They mention someone at work in a way that makes you uneasy. They flirt subtly, or not so subtly, right in front of you. They compliment others' looks, success, intelligence. That's because it is. They're watching your reaction. They want to see jealousy on your face. They feed off the discomfort because it signals to them that they still have emotional control over you. Your distress becomes proof of your attachment, and that attachment feeds their ego. When you bring it up, they deflect. You're told you're being paranoid, jealous, overly emotional. They laugh it off, deny everything, and flip the script until you're the one apologizing. This is classic gaslighting. They make you doubt your instincts, your emotions, your reality, and once you begin to internalize that doubt, they tighten their grip. You become quieter, you try harder, you think, maybe if I dress differently, act differently, be less needy, they'll focus solely on you again. Meanwhile, they continue creating more emotional disruptions. They may flirt more brazenly, they might use social media to flaunt their desirability. They may even involve third parties. People they know will make you feel threatened. But it's never about those other people. It's about your reaction. The goal is to make you feel insecure, unsteady, and desperate for reassurance that rarely comes. And when you do receive it, a kind word, a warm look, a rare moment of tenderness, it feels like a reward, a sign that maybe you're doing something right again. You cling to those crumbs, believing they're proof the relationship can be salvaged. That dynamic, where you're emotionally starving and they're holding the key, is precisely what keeps you trapped. Eventually, you start to lose sight of yourself. Your focus becomes narrowed to pleasing them, to earning back their attention, to decoding every mixed signal. You sacrifice your peace, your boundaries, your emotional well-being, just to stabilize something they never intended to make stable. This cycle, crafted with subtlety, sustained with manipulation, and powered by your desire for connection, is how narcissists maintain control. It's not an accident, it's a strategy. And it's designed to keep you constantly off balance, always reaching, always doubting, until you forget what it even felt like to be secure in love. You compare yourself to others, feel uneasy around them, and wonder constantly whether you're doing enough, and the narcissist thrives in that chaos. They flourish when you're unsettled, insecure, and desperately trying to gain their approval. It feeds their sense of superiority and reinforces their control. Because to a narcissist, love isn't about shared respect or commitment. It's about power, and jealousy, when strategically used, becomes one of their most effective weapons for keeping that power firmly in place. One of the most unsettling realities about narcissists is how effortlessly they can emotionally detach, even after moments of intense physical intimacy. You might believe that sharing a night, a bed, or a deeply vulnerable experience would create a meaningful bond, but for the narcissist, that emotional closeness doesn't register in the same way. They can switch off in an instant. One moment they're warm, attentive, even intoxicating, and the next they're distant, unresponsive, and cold. This sudden emotional shift isn't just confusing, it's devastating. While you were opening up, giving something real, they were simply using the experience to meet a need. For you, it felt significant. For them, it was transactional. The night before, they might have held you like you mattered, whispered words that sounded like love, and made you believe something lasting was forming. But by morning, their demeanor changes. They avoid your gaze, speak in short tones, or seem irritated by your presence. You're left spinning, trying to make sense of what shifted. You question the connection. You wonder if you misread everything. You even begin to blame yourself. But their coldness isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their cycle. True emotional intimacy requires presence and vulnerability, two things the narcissist instinctively avoids once they're no longer useful. To them, sex isn't sacred. It's not about deepening a connection. It's a tool. Sometimes it's used to win you back after conflict. Sometimes it's a prize for meeting their expectations. Sometimes it's simply part of the performance they put on to secure your loyalty. But it's rarely about genuine closeness, and because of that, they can walk away from it as if it never happened. You're left replaying every detail, every word, every look, every breath, trying to decode what was real, but they've already moved on emotionally. Their detachment isn't just emotional, it's strategic. They don't view you as a person with real feelings and needs. They see you as a resource, a source of supply. Once that supply has been extracted, they disconnect, clean and cold. This disconnection can shatter your self-esteem. You may feel abandoned, cheapened, discarded. You start to believe the problem must be you, that you weren't exciting enough, worthy enough, or lovable enough to hold their interest. But that's the lie. The problem isn't your capacity for connection. The problem is their inability to form one. They fear emotional intimacy because it threatens the polished image they've crafted, the one where they're in full control, untouchable, and always dominant. Vulnerability contradicts that image, so they run from it. Or worse, they fake it when it suits them and abandon it when it doesn't. What's more damaging is how they often flip the blame onto you. When you try to address the distance, they label you as needy, too emotional, or overly sensitive. They make your very human desire for closeness seem like a weakness. And because you care, because you're already emotionally entwined, you might start to believe them. You begin to question your expectations. You tell yourself that maybe asking for consistency is too much. Slowly you accept less. You settle for moments of attention instead of lasting commitment. You settle for touch without tenderness. This kind of detachment doesn't just break your heart, it distorts your understanding of what love is supposed to feel like. You begin to associate physical closeness with emotional pain. You start bracing for rejection even during the most intimate moments. You learn to tread carefully, walking on emotional eggshells, hoping to reignite a spark that always seems just out of reach. But for the narcissist, it was never about sharing something real. It was always about staying in control, and once they've taken what they want, they see no reason to stay connected. Their emotional distance is not random, it's who they are. And yet they often make it seem like you are the issue. They label your hurt as drama. They say you're reading too much into things. They deny your reality until you begin to silence your own voice. You find yourself shrinking, questioning everything, just to avoid another shutdown. You try harder, love louder, give more, hoping it will pull them back in. But it never lasts, and deep down, you begin to sense that it never will. And still, when they offer you even a little warmth, you cling to it. That temporary affection feels like proof that maybe things aren't so bad, that maybe you're just overreacting. But those scraps of validation are not evidence of love. They're part of the cycle. They're just enough to keep you hoping, just enough to keep you doubting yourself. Over time, this inconsistency rewires your expectations. You begin to equate love with anxiety, intimacy with instability. You stop expecting peace and start settling for temporary relief. You chase their approval while losing your sense of self. You forget that love shouldn't make you feel confused, that connection shouldn't feel like a test. Jealousy plays a crucial role in this cycle. In emotionally healthy relationships, jealousy may arise naturally and be addressed with communication and reassurance. But with a narcissist, jealousy is a device, intentional and carefully deployed. They manufacture insecurity, not out of love, but as a method of control. The more unsure you are, the less likely you are to question them. The more you chase after their approval, the more powerful they feel. At first, they may idolize you, make you feel chosen, but before long they begin introducing subtle provocations. They talk about their ex with nostalgic undertones. They mention someone attractive they saw. They flirt openly or praise someone else's looks in your presence. And though these moments feel deliberate, they remain just ambiguous enough for them to deny intent. They want to see your discomfort. Your jealousy fuels them. It's proof that they still have emotional sway over you. And when you react, when you express pain or suspicion, they feign innocence. They call you possessive, insecure, or irrational. They laugh off your concerns or accuse you of being controlling. And because you've already begun to question your instincts, you may accept that narrative. You start to believe that maybe your reactions are too intense. You tone yourself down. You suppress your needs. You try to become the person they'll never leave, and in doing so, you move further and further away from who you truly are. But what's most cruel is that this manipulation isn't even about the other person. The narcissist doesn't necessarily want them. What they want is the reaction it provokes in you. They want to see you compete for their attention. They want you to feel replaceable. That feeling of never being secure, never being enough, is what binds you to them. And when they do offer affection again, it feels like a lifeline. It feels like a win, but it's not love. It's a calculated reward, a way to pull you back into the game. Over time, you lose clarity. Your days become a blur of emotional highs and lows. You can't tell if you're growing or shrinking. You wonder if this is what love is supposed to be. But real love doesn't make you anxious all the time. It doesn't disappear after you become vulnerable. It doesn't make you question your worth at every turn. The truth is, narcissists don't seek relationships to connect. They seek them to dominate. They don't crave closeness. They crave control. And as long as you're in the cycle, craving what they once gave, fearing what they now withhold, you remain under that control. But the moment you stop chasing, the moment you begin to see through the pattern, the moment you start to listen to your inner voice again, that's when everything shifts. The mask begins to fall. The illusion begins to fade. And you begin to reclaim what was always yours, your clarity, your voice, your self-respect. Because the greatest fear of a narcissist isn't rejection, it's exposure. They fear being seen for who they truly are. They fear losing their grip. And nothing threatens them more than someone who finally understands the game and chooses not to play it anymore. You didn't lose them. They never truly showed up, but now you've shown up for yourself, and that's where healing begins.